Have you ever noticed how a trusted ally on the world stage can become a sworn enemy almost overnight? It's this bizarre pattern you see over and over in history. Well, today, we're diving into a source that argues this isn't just some coincidence. It's actually a predictable, repeatable cycle. Just look at this. On the left, that's 1983, you've got U.S. envoy Donald Rumsfeld shaking hands with Saddam Hussein, who was a key American ally against Iran at the time. Now flash forward 20 years. It's the same Donald Rumsfeld, but now he's the Secretary of Defense, and he's calling the same man irredeemable evil as a justification for a full-blown invasion. So what gives? How does this happen? How does a valued partner, someone whose abuses were often known about and tolerated for years, suddenly transform into a public monster? The source we're exploring today says this isn't an accident. It's a very deliberate pattern. And that pattern has a name: the Tyrant Lifecycle. It's basically a framework to help us see how power really operates on the world stage, way beyond the official stories we're usually told. So what exactly is this tyrant life cycle? Think of it as a predictable system. Step 1. A foreign leader gets embraced because they're a useful strategic asset. Step 2. When those strategic interests change, that same leader gets condemned and thrown to the wolves. The key idea here isn't that these are just a series of mistakes. The source argues it's a system designed to produce this exact outcome again and again. All right, so to really get how this system works, the source breaks it all down into 4 very distinct phases. It's basically the journey from a useful ally to public enemy number 1. So here's the roadmap. It all starts with the asset, where a leader is actually seen as a solution to a problem. Then you get the silence, where their crimes are kind of overlooked. Third, the rupture. That's when the relationship finally breaks. And it all wraps up with the rewriting, where the entire history of the relationship gets a major makeover. Let's dive into each one. Okay, phase 1, the asset. According to the source, every future monster starts out as a useful solution. And when you look at the examples, it clicks. Saddam Hussein was a wall against Iran. Pinochet in Chile, a hardcore anti-communist. The Shah of Iran was called an island of stability. Mobutu, Suharto, they were all key clients during the Cold War. They weren't supported in spite of their brutality. The source argues their brutality was often part of what made them so useful in the first place. And, that very brutality leads us right into phase 2, the silence. This is the period when these leaders are committing some of their absolute worst atrocities. But here's the thing, according to the source, this isn't happening in secret. The crimes are known, they're well documented, but they are systematically downplayed and ignored. I mean, this famous quote just says it all, doesn't it? He may be a son of a bitch, but he's our son of a bitch. The source uses this to show that the policy wasn't built on ignorance. It was a conscious, cynical calculation where a leader's value to you simply outweighed their crimes against their own people. This was the policy, right out in the open. Which brings us to phase 3, the rupture. Let's take Panama's Manuel Noriega, a perfect case study. For decades, the guy was a paid CIA asset. His crimes were an open secret, totally tolerated. But by 1989, he started getting in the way of U.S. policy and became a public embarrassment. And what happened? A full-scale U.S. invasion to remove him. As the source argues, this wasn't some sudden crisis of conscience. It was just a strategic recalculation. His usefulness had expired. After the rupture, after the big breakup, you get the final and maybe the most crucial phase, the rewriting. Now, the source makes a really interesting point here. History doesn't get falsified with outright lies. It's more reorganized. Years of friendly handshakes and alliances get pushed into the background, while the very atrocities that were ignored for so long are suddenly front and center, presented as the only reason the relationship had to end. And this is why there's one question that can completely dismantle this new story. What did we know, and when did we know it? According to the source, asking this one simple question reveals the long, messy history of complicity that the rewriting process is designed to make you forget. It's the one loose thread that can unravel the whole thing. So you might be thinking, okay, this is all interesting history, but is it just a relic of the past? Well, the source we're looking at says no, not at all. It argues that this exact life cycle is happening right now, and it applies this 4-phase framework to a conflict that is very much still unfolding. The source turns its analysis to the conflict in Gaza that began after the attacks of October 7, 2023. It points to the casualty figures from Gaza's health ministry, which are accepted by the UN and other international bodies, noting that over 50,000 Palestinians have been killed. The source argues that this is the silence phase playing out in real time. For example, when the UN Security Council proposed ceasefire resolutions, the U.S. used its veto power to block them. When the International Criminal Court moved to issue arrest warrants, the U.S. refused to acknowledge its jurisdiction. And with the genocide case at the International Court of Justice, the U.S. has provided diplomatic cover for its ally. The argument is that this creates a pattern. You acknowledge a humanitarian crisis with words, but you block accountability with actions. But, and this is a huge but, the source says there's a crucial difference today. All of this is happening with unprecedented transparency. In our hyper-connected, high-information world, no one can really claim they don't know what's going on. The silence isn't about hiding the facts anymore. It's about publicly managing their moral importance. So what's the big takeaway from all this? What does this pattern truly reveal? Well, the source drives home one final, really powerful argument about what this life cycle actually is. And here's the core thesis. The Tyrant Lifecycle is a feature, not a bug. It's a system that's working exactly as it's intended to. By framing every breakup as a great moral victory over some newly discovered monster, the system gets a clean slate. This, the source claims, is what makes it possible to just repeat the entire cycle with the next asset, ensuring we never really have to learn from the past. Which leaves all of us with a final, lingering question. With the history of our current moment being documented in real time for everyone to see, will we remember what was known and when it was known? Or will the story once again be rewritten? The source we've looked at today argues that ultimately, that choice is ours.